Welcome to Immunity Group Australia podcast, where we dive into the latest breakthroughs and stories from the world of science and medicine. I'm your host, Nina Markovic, and today we are exploring a groundbreaking clinical trial that's making waves in the medical community. In this episode, we will be spotlighting Professor Hasan Arshad from the University of Southampton, whose pioneering work is playing a pivotal role in Natasha's clinical trial. But what is the Natasha clinical trial? It is a trial worth £2.7 million funded by the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, a leading food allergy charity from the United Kingdom. There are 3 groups of participants in the trial: children aged 6 to 23 with a peanut allergy, children aged 3 to 23 with a cow's milk allergy, and children aged 2 and 3 with a peanut allergy. The Oral Immunotherapy trial uses everyday foods to desensitize participants to their allergies. 10 hospitals across England and Scotland are taking part in the Natasha clinical trial. It is a trial which began in 2023 as a randomized control trial, which is the gold standard in medical research. In addition, the trial is training a network of NHS staff to offer OIT treatment. If successful, it will provide the evidence for the treatment to be made available on the NHS. Results of the Natasha clinical trial are expected in 2027. Let's welcome Professor Arshad to Immunity Group Australia's podcast. Professor Hasan Arshad, welcome to Immunity Group Australia's podcast.
Thank you, Nana. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm delighted.
We are so happy to present you to Australian audiences and to our listeners. You're a professor at the University of Southampton, but you're wearing actually multiple hats. And one of the reasons I would like to interview you today is to tell us a little bit about how did you get involved in Natasha's trial? What does it mean to be involved in such a big project? How many hospitals are involved, and what do you hope to achieve?
Right, that's a lot to go over, but I'll start with my meeting with Nadim and Tanya. It was, I think, back in 2018. They have established or wishing to establish a charity foundation that would help research and clinical services in the UK, which, as you probably know, are not up to the standard of many of our Western developed countries. They have been fantastic since then. I met them with Stephen Holgate, my colleague, in a meeting, and that was inspiring. They have had the Natasha law approved by the UK Parliament, so that was a big win. But they did not want to stop there. They had in their sight to change the allergy practices. And they asked me, and I remember clearly, they said, well, we want to support research, but we don't just want to support some research that is done. We want to change practice. We want to change practice in the UK. And what is your idea, a big idea, to do that? And I thought about it. There are various, as you know, we come up with a lot of things that we want to do. There are some very novel things one can do that has never been done before. There are other things that I'm very passionate about. But oral immunotherapy is one of those things that there is a lot of evidence in the literature. A lot of studies have been done in the US. And as we were just talking, there are some countries and some specialists who've been practicing it, providing it to the patients. But here in the UK, it's supposed to be a fairly advanced healthcare system, and we are not offering it. So I told them that, look, if we can get to this stage where we can get NICE to approve oral immunotherapy, we can then provide this, and this is desperately needed. And they said, well, what do we need to get there? And I said, well, we need a large clinical trial, for one. to have this evidence locally, because there are a lot of studies that have been done, but they are mostly in US, and there is some commercial studies, but there hasn't been a large multi-center trial in the UK that the NICE would, sorry, I should explain what NICE is. So NICE is the National Institute of Healthcare, which approves our healthcare provision at a national level. If they recommend something, they look at the evidence, they look at the cost effectiveness, they look at the effectiveness, they look at the whole health economic aspect of any trial, the quality of life improvement that any new intervention will bring. But once they recommend something, our NHS healthcare system is obliged to provide that. That's what we... So, and that's what we were heading. So we said, well, where can we get from point A, where there is evidence in the literature that this oral immunotherapy works, to where NICE has that evidence that they need, that it is effective and it is cost effective. So we started to think about it and developed that protocol, proposed to them. They were very generous in funding the study. And the key element of that were that we need to do this with ordinary food that people can buy from the superstore. There has been a number of clinical trials. Some have used, as you know, the capsules, etc. But the whole argument was that if we can get our products right, our protocols right, our procedures correct, and give detailed information on how to do the immunotherapy using, for instance, peanut or cow's milk bought from the superstore, so far as they're given detailed information on that, it can be done safely. That was our hypothesis, which would avoid, first of all, commercialization of this being less expensive, but also be available to everyone. And that's where and also that that will make it more cost effective and very attractive for the NICE to prove it. There were other things that we will need to collect the evidence for, and one of them was quality of life improvement. And again, many of the studies we looked at very carefully at the literature, and there has been some studies where quality of life was assessed, but mostly as a post hoc and not by children as well as adults. There were just questionnaires submitted to the parents in many studies, but not done properly as established in the protocol at the beginning of the study. So, and that is what NICE usually need to ensure that a new intervention, new product that has some cost implications, need to improve quality of life of the patient. It is just not we saying that, oh, the patient will improve because we will treat their food allergy. There has to be proper evidence for that. We were also hoping that in the process we will train healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, etc., in oral immunotherapy administration, because it's a complex process. And there were only 1 or 2 centers where this has been done previously, like London, Cambridge, Southampton, but it wasn't available. The people were not even in many allergy departments familiar with this product. And even if it was approved, if there is no trained people to administer it, again, people will not receive that treatment. So by doing this trial, as we are doing now in 10 centers across the UK, and including England and Scotland, in 2 years' time, there will be a number of allergists who would have been trained in the procedure. They can carry out this safely. And one of the things that we added later, which has again not been done previously, was to administer it entirely at home. So all the studies that have been done, as far as we knew, would bring the patient in to updose. So how the immunotherapy is done is just, very briefly, if I could explain that patients who have food allergy, they are assessed by what we call oral food challenge to ensure that they have food allergy and to also see how much of the food that they react, which we call minimum threshold dose, because we need to know that so that we can start the immunotherapy with that dose upwards. But they take that dose at home in the first week, but then we bring them to the hospital to increase the dose, because it was thought that increasing the dose carries some risk, and that needs to be done under direct observation. And then they go home and take that food in that same amount for a week, every day. Then they come to the hospital. That means a lot of clinic visits that involve training, that also increase healthcare need healthcare resources. And how this, and we would have never thought about it. How this came about was that during COVID, there were some patients at Imperial who were having immunotherapy. COVID arrived and they couldn't get to the hospital. And the options were either to stop immunotherapy or do it at home. And as the COVID revolutionized the audiovisual, which we are using now, it was thought that for some patients who were very, very keen and parents who wanted to continue that, could it be done as a video link? So the patient being at home, the doctor or nurse sitting at the end, they would do that under observation, but on the screen, and a patient would be observed. If there is any reaction, that they can be told immediately how to do that. Now that would have huge advantages, because again, in the UK, there are only 6 to 8 major allergy centers. And even if the treatment was approved, we would only be providing this to the patients who live in the vicinity of those centers. But if it can be done, the updosing especially can be done at home, then that opens up the treatment provision to patients all across the UK, because they could be living anywhere. They only need to travel for the initial assessment, and then everything can be done at home. So that was a very novel feature. So how we planned our study was to have a multi-center study with patients who would have peanut and food allergy, peanut and milk allergy. Those were the 2 foods selected because they cause most anaphylaxis among many other foods. And we thought that we'll go after the peanut and milk. And then there are other foods, of course, that it can be extended to later. And we would have 3 arms. One control arm, where children or young adults will continue with the same routine management, meaning that they would continue to avoid the food and carry a EpiPen. They will be assessed in a very similar way. So they will come in, they will have their food challenge, and they will have the food challenge at the end to see whether there is any difference if you don't do anything. And the other 2 groups were both given immunotherapy. So one would have the immunotherapy done in the hospital. So the hospital updosing. They don't have to stay in the hospital, but they would come in weekly to the hospital clinic where the dose will be increased. Then they go home, take that dose for a week. Then they come back. And it takes about 6 to 9 months to get to the dose, which is high enough for us to say they don't need to avoid the food, they can carry on with their life. And if that food is just an ordinary food bought from the supermarket, then they can continue with that. And the third group was what we call home dosing group, where they would come in for the initial assessment, but then they go do all the dosing at home. Weekly, they would contact the hospital nurse, a research nurse, and say, I'm going to increase my dose. And they would say, yes, of course, if you do that with a video link, they would do that, observe for half an hour at home. And if there is any reaction, they are told how to treat that. So the three groups, one control group and two active group, home dosing and hospital dosing, will continue for 6 to 9 months. By that time, they would be tolerating significant amount, something like if it is peanut, so 6 to 8, 10 peanuts, or milk, the amount of up to 30, 40 mils of the cow's milk. So enough for them to say that they are exposed, they would not get any reaction. Some would tolerate higher amount, but the whole idea was that if all of them at least, or 70 to 80% of them would get to this stage where avoidance is not necessary and it is not a risk to them. And many of them would be able to give up EpiPen if they are tolerating freely. But of course, like any other treatment, the response is variable. Some respond brilliantly and don't have to carry EpiPen. They can eat freely, whereas other would still need to monitor how much they eat.
Was there much of a difference between the hospital group and the home group? Because I guess how would there be any sort of psychological readiness decision made between parents who are more willing, or how was the decision made who goes into which group?
So it's a good question. For the whole study is what we call randomized study. It's not a blinded study, but it's a randomized study. And the randomization occurs by our digital database, completely random allocation. So when the patients are assessed and they are eligible, then their data goes into the database system, and it comes up with hospital dosing, or it may come up with control. So we or the patient have no, they cannot decide where they go, which you're really right that as we started, they would have their own thoughts, especially they didn't want to go into the control group because they wanted to have immunotherapy, all of them. But because that's what, they're really, really, many of our research participants were attracted to this research because they, as a part of the research, they would get the immunotherapy and that would protect their children. But when we told them that we have 3 arms, so they randomly could end up with either the control arm or the active arm, most of them would say that they would want to have to go into the active arm. They want to have immunotherapy. And I can understand that. So what we decided to do, but we need, for the study data to be robust, we need a control arm, and we need to make sure that that's completely random allocation. So we're not biased about whom we are putting in the control arm and who we are putting in the intervention. But we promised them that once this study is complete, then they would be given immunotherapy. That would not be part of the study, but so we, at the end of the study, we will give the control group parents immunotherapy. They, again, did not have any choice about whether they go into the home dosing or hospital dosing, except that they can always say no if they do not want it. But if they do want, we assured them that they will be, monitored closely. And it has turned out so far that yes, we can, we've not seen any significant issues with children having the dosing at home. They can generally carry out, they're fairly usually with a lot of explanation and support. They are fairly confident now that they can take it at home, and that is very, very convenient for them. So those now in the control group, in the home dosing group, really like it.
I think this is probably the most unique study in the world, precisely also because of that third arm, because from all the studies that I have at least come across, there has never been done. That third arm has not been ever tested. How big was your research team when you were designing the study?
Initially, the research team was what we call our core group, which is 3 or 4, 4 of us as the kind of senior academics, and the fifth, who is a very senior academic, but not a clinician. She's a dietitian. You probably know Karina Winter. So she was at Southampton, went to Denver, Colorado, and she's one of the best dietitian. From the dietitian perspective, we needed her, and it was myself, Paul Turner from Imperial, Mish Legenasi, who is a pediatric allergist at Southampton, and Graham Roberts, who's also a pediatric allergist in my department. So we have 4 who discussed the protocol, but primarily Paul and I who wrote the initial draft.
And when you were discussing this with other colleagues in the UK or perhaps wider in Europe or in the world, was there any skepticism initially? Because you had a really big battle really ahead of you.
Oh, exactly. There were people, we sent it out to people outside of our academics, just because it was such a huge undertaking. We did want to know what other people think about it. Do they think it is worth doing with all the efforts and expense it involves? Do they think that it is going to be safe? Because oral immunotherapy, food oral immunotherapy especially, is one of those procedures that is inherently risky. So it's, we're giving food to the person who's allergic to that food to the level that they get anaphylaxis and end up in hospital. And yet we're trying to do the same things. That is the kind of treatment that is not, normally you would give treatment to counter that. If someone is having a problem, it's a pain or an infection, the treatment would involve to suppress that. With this immunotherapy, it will get suppressed in the end, but initially it's where titrating the dose becomes so important. So it is one of the most complex studies that I have done, and we expected a lot of people who would get some adverse effect, who would get some side effects. So initially there was some skepticism that how we're doing it, especially with the home dosing. We benefited from that review, but overcome that, but we never lost the sight that we need to carry out that study for the overall benefit of our patients.
And now 10 hospitals are involved, but they're mostly England-based, except you mentioned there is one in Scotland. Is that correct?
There are 2 in Scotland, Edinburgh and Aberdeen.
And once, hopefully, if this model is adopted and approved, can you foresee it going sort of UK-wide to all counties and states?
Yes, correct. So we hope that we will submit this to the NICE, and once approved, they will recommend it to the what we call NHS England and NHS Scotland, the Wales as well, but Wales generally follows what is recommended for NHS England anyway. But the 2 sites in the Scotland were important because that would ensure that the treatment, once approved, is available UK-wide.
That is absolutely fantastic. And when it comes to training doctors, now that's a very interesting point which you raised. What did you find sort of most useful in that process? Some lessons that you can probably share with others.
So one of the things that we found in the process was communication. I mean, that's what I will say is that we learned a lot about communication itself in the process. So we started to have the initial visits to explain the study and in detail have that, which is standard for any clinical trial. And apart from then, discussing the protocol, then you do the visit, initial site-specific visit to train them. But that is a kind of short training for 2 to 3 hours, explain everything. Then we established these communication channels. So and that is the recent post-COVID media facilitation has really helped. So I wouldn't have thought that this was kind of level of communication was possible 10 years ago, and because apart from because previously we used to have the visits, perhaps the telephone. Now we are doing so. We established the regular, what we call trial steering committee, which meets every month, and we go over the project. We established the WhatsApp groups where they communicate any problem at one place. Or any experience on one place, they would immediately put it on the WhatsApp to say, I've seen this. Have you guys seen anything like this? Or I'm struggling that this patient has an infection. Should I reduce the dose? And there's a collective wisdom where, so we established multiple channels apart from the usual standard visits and being available. So one of the things is that 2 physicians actually, one as the first and then the backup is available 24 hours a day for our patients. So they can bring contact.
It's a line, isn't it? It's like a phone line, is it? Or
it's like a phone line that they can as an emergency line, then and they are given advice as to what to do, even if there's anything minor. According to what they are experiencing at any time, they're given advice. Sometimes they get the video channel with them to say, okay, well, I want you to do this or that and take use EpiPens. But there is a lot of communication among the study groups, as well as I was saying that we have, apart from the standard trial steering committee and trial management meetings, we have established these WhatsApp groups, which have the among the physicians. So if there's any issue with one, say, well, hi guys, I've got this problem. Some patient had an infection. Should I reduce the dose? And it's a collective wisdom that helps there where they share their experiences. We've also got an app, which is a really good thing. So apart from the database, where we collect the usual things, the information about the CRF and the questionnaires, etc., this is a bespoke app which is developed for this trial, and they so all the dosing, etc., is recorded on that app. So the patients would log in every day, and they would take the medication, record any adverse effects if they have. They can see, the physicians can see it in live on their login that the patient has taken it. So everything is done live where the information gets it. So if the patient hasn't taken it, it raises a concern on the app for the study team to say, that patient hasn't taken app. So they can contact them, email or phone to say, could we remind you? So it reminds the patient, it informs the physician, and the app has done really very, very been helpful in making sure that the whole thing is done safely. because anything that they have, they would be the physician team would be informed, and if nothing happens, they also raises an alarm that your patient X is not log in, is not taking the dose.
It's like a real-time app tied to a calendar of some kind.
Yes.
So, Hasan, what you have just described is absolutely revolutionary in terms of innovation. Not only you have introduced a clinical trial for OIT in the UK and the home dosing arm, but you have managed to roll out an app across 10 public hospitals. I think that in itself deserves a gold medal.
Oh, you're very kind. We're just trying for our patients to get the best, but also the safety is paramount. And really, for the app, for me, what has ensured is safety in a very complex multi-center trial, and I feel I sleep better at night.
Professor Hassan, when did you first hear about oral immunotherapy? So when Natasha's parents approached you and you gave them this, brilliant idea, which was not easy to execute at all, what inspired you to actually give them this idea?
So that's my patients. So they, as we all have known, various kind of relatively small studies that have been done, and I was keeping very close eye on that. And that seems that, this practice can help patients. And so I was keeping myself abreast of the literature. But then the patients who've come in, and this was a kind of often a very relevant question. Yes, I'm going to avoid it, but I am a chef, work in the food industry. How can I avoid shellfish when it's everywhere? Someone is saying that, milk is something that is in so many products. Is there anything you can do? And I say, no, actually, the only thing I can do is to send you to the dietitian to help with this avoidance. And that just keep ringing in my mind that we're not doing what we really need to do, because yes, avoidance isn't really a treatment. Giving EpiPen is just a safety net. Again, it's not a treatment. So this is really the only treatment that they get, which is to get over their allergy and kind of, be normal. And just one other thing that, of course, that is not needed, but there has been patients who take it to the extreme. So they are so scared that they don't want to go out. Even otherwise, people who are in the profession. So I recently had a physiotherapist who developed severe peanut allergy, and he stopped working, stopped going out to the social activities, and because she was so scared. That, requires some reassurances, etc. There are many people live with that, but at the end of the day, we needed some proper treatment, and that's what kind of really inspired me to do something more than what we're doing now.
That's absolutely brilliant, and you went beyond beyond to imagined future, which is our present now. Could you see or foresee, perhaps, if you had a crystal ball, the UK's model, which your team has implemented, potentially becoming an inspiration to other countries, including in Australia's neighborhood, in Southeast Asia, in Pakistan as well, and India and China, perhaps?
Well, we really hope so, but I think that it is going to be influenced by different healthcare systems. So in those countries where the healthcare system is to some extent similar to the UK, meaning publicly funded healthcare systems that is common in different shape or form to Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and Canada, I would say, that in these countries, this kind of evidence, which is large study now it's getting to be 300 children, including all the peanut and milk, and robust evidence. Hopefully, they will consider multi-center study is there to provide that kind of effectiveness and cost effectiveness, because for publicly funded studies or publicly funded healthcare systems, cost effectiveness is equally important because they have multiple asks, and rightly so. So we want to provide that, and various things that we have done in the trial, like using the ordinary food, like doing home dosing, etc., would improve that balance between the effectiveness and cost effectiveness. So if they see that evidence, and hopefully we'll get over the we'll get the nice recommendation, that can be implemented certainly in these countries where there's a public health system that works, because they could look at the same evidence. They were probably looking at the same evidence of effectiveness versus cost effectiveness.
And in terms of private practice, do you think that the publicly funded system would actually inspire more doctors in the UK, including potentially general practitioners, because there has been a move to educate them more in the allergy space generally? How do you foresee that trend perhaps going?
Yes, I hope so. So one of the things that also we have not so much discussed is that prior to this study, as you know, there has been many studies, but they have used different things. So, for instance, if you take the milk, one study is used the milk as milk, the others use the powder. Third have used milk products in different things to, even in one study, I heard that they've used cake. Sorry. So there are different products and different protocols. What again was the idea that in a large studies, if we can define how this study can, or if this treatment can be done with the specific products that we use in that specific doses in the first year when we are updosing, and then in the maintenance, how we can expand patient choices in the second year while they are having this maintenance. And if it is all laid out, and not only laid out that we think that this is done, we have laid it out and proven that it works and it is safe. If we can do that, then that could form the basis of the recommendations by the allergy societies, for instance, to say guidance can be written, so like we write the guidelines, but the lack of guidelines has been because the different studies have used different products and different protocols. And if in a larger study, we can come up with this and prove that it is safe, the guidelines can be written on that basis, and then that would facilitate its provision by the private healthcare providers as well, hopefully.
And do you also foresee expanding the foods, the range of foods in the program in the future?
Yes, I hope so, whether it is me who is doing it, or hopefully other people or researchers will get inspired to say that if those two foods, which really cause most anaphylaxis, can be done safely and effectively, and also with the app being available to then in the follow-on studies, that this can be done with a similar protocol, changing obviously the type of food, but all the infrastructure backup with the app, with the database, etc., has been all settled. So hopefully that can then be expanded to other foods.
I hope we will have a follow-up conversation to present your extraordinary results, which were already actually featured on BBC News. That's how I actually found out about Natasha's trial, and the publicity is very important, and the government support. Has there been much feedback from the Minister for Health in the UK under the previous government and now the new one?
So we have had lots of interest from the media, and we know that the Department of Health is very keen. And Natasha Allergy Research Foundation is really good at that that communication with for instance, some parliament members from the Department of Health. Interestingly, they contacted me just before the election, about 3 weeks ago, that the shadow health secretary, who is now health secretary, would like to come to Southampton and see how the Natasha trial is being done. They're very interested. I checked with our university, but I think because it was the election period, there was the issue of not because there is some kind of ban before the election period
The
for
caretaker
them
mode,
to
yes.
get any, yeah, as you know. So we postponed it, but hopefully, yes, we would, because that communication is still there. We communicated to the NAF that our sponsor has suggested that this be postponed to sometime after election. Now he's a health secretary, maybe he's get very busy, but hopefully we'll get that, because we need that kind of exposure and their knowledge when it goes to the NICE, to have that some favorable opinion. No, not unjustly. Obviously, the NICE would look at the evidence irrespective of any other exposures, but the NICE approval is one thing, and sometimes the trusts don't implement that, citing various lack of resources or other issues. So what we are hoping is, and NAF is very, not Nadim and Tanya have inspired many people, and they are very good, and they're hoping that once we get the proper scientific evidence, they will then to play their role in making sure that the health trusts don't get out of it.
That's a brilliant message, and a message of hope. And your story is really a story of an alliance from the grassroots to the top echelons of government. Your vision and Natasha's parents' vision combined, and your group's vision, has transformed the history of the UK in the allergy field.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's very kind. We're just trying to get the best for our patients who've really not been given the attention that they deserve.
Thank you, Professor Hasan Arshad, and I hope to speak with you again soon.
It was a pleasure speaking with you on all these aspects, and I'll be delighted to speak again once perhaps we have some provisional results.
And we would love to see you one day, perhaps in Australia, present your research results.
Oh, I will be, it'll be great. I'll keep thinking about, visiting Australia. So if I do visit, I'll contact you. Maybe we can meet and discuss, things of common interest.
That would be great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Take care.